Welcome to Beyond the Bizarre, a podcast curated to all things, well, bizarre. My name is Brianna, and I will be sharing with you urban legends, lore, ghost stories, and more from around our planet. Hello, everyone. It's Tuesday, and by now you know what that means, a new episode of Beyond the Bizarre. Thank you guys for returning back here with us to go down a rabbit hole some more of the bizarre, weird, supernatural, what have you. We're so happy to have you guys here to go over another bizarre topic with us. Today's episode marks the end of our end of summer horrors special for the month of August. So, although we're sad to see the end of summer horrors finally come to an end, it's by far nowhere near the end of our journey here on this podcast. So, last week we talked about two urban legends of Japan, Hanako-san and Akamanto, which were very interesting. I really loved learning about it, really loved reading about it. As bizarre as they were, especially Akamanto, it was it was really cool to learn about, especially with different countries. I did, as stated on the podcast, I did include the list of some Asian horror films that are some of my favorites that are actually featured on Netflix at this current time in the United States. For our international listeners, I hope that it's available for you guys as well, but I did list the name of the films if you guys have some other way to access them. They're there on our website, beyondthebizarre.com. I really think it's so important to really kind of immerse yourself in other cultures. Also, their art as well, and film is an important part of art. So to be able to view different films, even if they're not in your native language, to be able to view those films and see horror from another standpoint, I think is a really great thing. I think it's something that any horror fan should definitely do at some point. As I stated, at first I was skeptical that I didn't want to. I was like, I'm not going to understand. And I was skeptic. But I want to say that it started with the film The Doll. I was just going through Netflix one day and it came up on the trailer, the different trailers for all the movies that had recently been released. I actually want to say it's Sabrina, not The Doll. It actually was Sabrina. It was when the film Sabrina, which is the third film in the Doll franchise, was posted on Netflix. It had just premiered and it was on there on a list of other films that had recently premiered. And I just watched it and I was blown away. It's like, you know what? I read the subtitles on every movie anyway. I might as well read it on this one. And I was blown away. So when I found out that it was the third installment of a franchise, I went back and watched the first two. And then I branched off and watched other movies by the director of the film, which was Rocky Soraya. I had watched all of those movies, Third Eye 2. Those are the top ones I would definitely recommend. The other one is called The Promise. In the last episode, I incorrectly stated it was called The Pact. It's actually called The Promise. And that movie, once again, centers on the 1997 financial crisis in Japan, where these two friends make a pact to commit suicide, but one doesn't follow through on the promise and is shortly thereafter haunted. Really good movie. Check that one out too. My love for all things horror is what kind of makes me branch out to different films and different art forms, different urban legends, and I was really happy to be able to share the two that I was able to share with you guys last week, Hanako-san and Akamanto. But for this week's episode, we're back here in the States, and this episode is actually going to be kind of I don't want to say different episode. We've kind of nicknamed this episode our Hometown Haunts episode for the simple fact that we're featuring something tonight that's close to home, close to our hometown of Roanoke, Virginia. So it's kind of close to there, and it's been a legend that's been kind of shared through generations but has somewhat been lost through time. The legend that I'm going to share with you guys tonight is the legend of the seven gates of hell. The seven gates of hell refer to a house located on a hill with seven black iron gates that go up the hill that lead up to the house. Now, the location does vary. I've heard different variations as to where it supposedly is. It's rumored to be off Route 666 in Catawba towards Smith Mountain Lake, Virginia. So on map, Route 666 is located just outside of Forest, Virginia, near the Thomas Jefferson Poplar Forest. I was also told by one local on one side of the road, I guess there's 2 points that you can access it. On one side, there is a church at the beginning of the road, which is ironic since it's called the Seven Gates of Hell. So I thought that was kind of cool, I guess, worth mentioning. So, with the Seven Gates of Hell, per lore, there's actually a story that is supposed to be told as one ventures through the seven gates. Unfortunately, through our research, we were not able to find the exact telling of the story. However, through probing and asking around, we were able to find a decent synopsis of the story that you're supposed to tell, or more so the background as to why the area is rumored to be haunted or evil. So before I do get into the lore, any details regarding the seven gates, I do want to give a disclaimer that I really need to start doing at the beginning of the episode. I just keep forgetting. I'm actually going to make note to start doing this at the beginning of each episode, but it does escape me sometimes. But for this episode in particular, this tale, it does include a retelling of gore. Well, not so much as gore, I wouldn't say gore, but just a retelling of torture and murder of African American slaves back in the 1900s. That's the center focus of the story of the Seven Gates. So if you're listening and you feel that you may be triggered or you just would rather not hear that, that is fine. Oh, but there is going to be a second part of the episode which we're going to focus on something different entirely. So if you want to hang around and maybe skip through, we totally understand. But I just wanted to give that disclaimer that we're going to kind of get into detail on that kind of negative side. But in order to tell the story, we have to be able to tell that part. So, once again, if you feel uncomfortable or if you're young, under the age of 13, please seek parental permission or listen with a parent before listening into this tale. And like I said, I'm going to start putting this at the beginning of each episode just to get it out the way. But since I forgot, I might as well do it now. So, back to the topic at hand. This is the lore of the Seven Gates of Hell. The legend of the Seven Gates of Hell dates back to the 1900s, where there was a family that went insane and went on a mass killing spree, killing all of their African American slaves. During that terrible night, the family hung slaves from the back porch in the surrounding woods and tortured the remaining slaves in the basement of their home. Per locals who have visited the area, there is a cemetery on the property that is mostly one family, by the last name of Barton. We were not able to identify if this family are the ones responsible for the tragedy, but it does make one wonder. The spirits of these slaves are rumored to haunt the property and the surrounding woods. One local of the area that was able and brave enough to travel up the hill stated that they could see the shadows and silhouettes of bodies hanging and hauled butt back to their car, afraid to turn around to witness what they had seen again. We were able to get a hold of some archives, but the people who did see things elected not to share, not to give any detail as to what they had witnessed. They said it had terrified them and they just rather not talk about it. They just rather leave it in the past, which is understandable. We did also run into some skeptics who were brave enough to go up there, but they did not personally experience anything. One local did share with us their experience. we'll call them Corey for the sake of them not wanting their identity known, which is understandable. But Corey stated that they had grown up in the area in the 70s or 80s, and everyone at that time knew that the Seven Gates were haunted. The old house and the two cemeteries surrounding it were haunted. They also obliged to us that the family that lives there has been the same family for years. So that kind of made us wonder, could it be the Barton family or the descendants of the Barton family? So that was really interesting for us to learn that it could be the same family after all these years. So we knew about the first cemetery already from the other locals that shared their information with us, that one of the cemeteries does belong to mostly one family, the Bartons. Well, from Corey's information that he was able to give us, there is also a cemetery where the that holds these slaves that were murdered on the property as well. He shared with us that one day him and a neighborhood friend went up to the Seven Gates and, quote, got the bejesus scared out of them, and they never went back. Unfortunately, Corey did not divulge details as to what he had seen or experienced, so it does lead to the imagination what he could have seen. Upon reflecting, Corey stated that hearing rumors and stories, you can freak yourself out before you even get there. Which that makes sense since there is a story you're supposed to tell while going through the gates. So when it's dark and you're hearing this story and you already have the rumors on the brain, it could be easy to start seeing things or just make it easier for things to manifest. I really do wish we could have learned what Corey had experienced, but he did share with us that he did go back on a separate occasion, but wasn't able to leave his car. He just felt really uneasy and freaked out. He just left and hasn't been back since then. So I would really one day like to know exactly what people are seeing. Some people did claim to see silhouettes and shadows. That's really scary. So I would like to hear more. Maybe one day we can revisit. But back to the story that locals were able to share with us. Those who did brave it aren't able to make it past the fifth gate. At this point, at the fifth gate, all electronics cease to work, and if you're in a car, it stops. That is why, per locals in the area, people usually walk through the gates and not drive. Back in the mid 80s, the gates actually served as a party hotspot. Those brave enough to travel did recall feeling uneasy, and per one local, when they were walking through the cemetery, the ground underneath them began to move and would shift under their feet. Now, can you imagine just walking now? That freaks me out. Now, the first thing that popped into my mind was, okay, maybe they're intoxicated, maybe they're just feeling like the ground is moving, but with all the tragedy and terrible things that happened, it's very possible that things were shifting and that the ground was moving. Who knows? And also, it kind of brings me back to the Clinton Road episode back in New Jersey, where locals and teenagers would go back in like the 80s and party at Cross Castle. They would party at Cross Castle like they did at the Seven Gates house. So that's really, really crazy. I think it was just something back in the 80s where people just wanted to go to these places that were rumored to be haunted or rumored to be evil and just be daring and do something that they weren't supposed to do. I guess it was also with the emergence of a lot of horror movies, especially back in the 80s. The 80s was a big genre for horror, so I guess that was the main motivator, just being brave and daring and just wanting to experience that feeling and that exhilaration and that also adrenaline from that terror or just breaking the rules in general. Now, when doing research, some locals recall being under the influence while visiting and just wanting to, in a fit of will, wanting to do something daring. So, a lot of our interviewees did admit to that. They wanted to just feel kind of daring and bold and to have something to go back and tell their friends that they did. Now, when visiting under the influence, they did say that they did experience some visions, but they just pretty much blamed their sightings on alcohol and drugs, namely weed. Most people said they were under the influence of weed when they went there. So I'm not gonna say that's not possible to, when you're under the influence, to maybe see things that aren't there. or maybe they just saw things that maybe frightened them and just it felt more comforting to blame it on them being under the influence. Okay, I didn't see that. It's just me being drunk or me being high. I didn't see that. But maybe also those substances, especially marijuana, it could have heightened their senses maybe to the point where they were able to see things that were manifesting actually there. I'm not saying that they were actually seeing things. I'm not saying that they was real. Personally, I believe they were seeing things. That's just because I'm not skeptic. I just believe in that type of thing. So if they said they saw it, I believe it. We just like to say that we here at Beyond the Bazaar are not condoning anyone to visit the Seven Gates. We're just sharing the local legend. Locals have warned us if you do not get spooked by the ghost first, the owner of the property does not like trespassers and you may be met by a farmer with a shotgun instead of disgruntled spirits. And to be honest, I'm not sure which is scarier at that point. There is a rumor that the gates are open every Halloween, but we would check before visiting. So we're not saying go up there on Halloween. We're not saying go up there tomorrow. It is a private property, so we don't want anyone trespassing on our behalf and saying that, oh, we heard it on the podcast. You heard it here. Do not go up there. If you do, it's at your own risk, not because we said so. Just want to put that out there as a little disclaimer. So with the seven gates, it was kind of hard getting some detailed information and some detailed encounters on the seven gates. It's a little bit of an old legend that is appeared to have gotten lost with time, but we felt it was something still worth mentioning. And hopefully, maybe in the future, we may revisit if we ever get the full story that you're supposed to tell, or if we get more details on the legend itself. But it was really awesome to be able to share something that's so close to our town, our hometown of Roanoke, Virginia, Catawba, Bedford, Virginia, all that surrounding area. So it was really cool to be able to share that on the podcast. Before we close out this segment here, because we do have another segment coming up here for our end of summer horror special. But before we close out the segment on the Seven Gates of Hell, we at Beyond the Bazaar would like to extend a special thank you to the members of the History of Roanoke, Virginia Facebook group for providing feedback on our inquiry about the Seven Gates. It really helped to get real information in real time from the locals. So thank you guys for helping us out during this corona times, this pandemic. It's not easy to be able to actually go out and question and interview people, and emailing people may take a little bit more time. So it's really great to be able to just go on Facebook and ask a group and get so many answers and people willing to help. So we really greatly appreciate you guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Moving on to the second portion of tonight's episode of our end of summer horrors special here on Beyond the Bazaar. For the second portion, we're going to share with you all some rumored haunted schools throughout the United States. We just did some research, some general research here, and found some popular ones that we thought were cool and we would like to share with you guys for this last bit of the episode. So, the first one that we have here is from Anchorage, Alaska. The school is called Night Mute High School. So at Night Mute High School, there's a story that there was a grave that was discovered underneath room number 106. So at Night Mute High School, a little girl is said to haunt the school's bathrooms, and she is known to flush toilets and flicker the lights on and off. So this is kind of like similar to Moaning Myrtle from Harry Potter, kind of like Hanako-san was. She haunts the bathrooms. But the difference with this spirit at Night Mute High School is that she's not only confined to the bathrooms of the school. She's also heard wandering throughout the school, humming little tunes and songs. And per some encounters, when no one is at the gym, she'll sometimes take the opportunity to shoot some hoops. That's that's kind of cool. She's walking through, gliding through the halls, singing some songs, and in the gym trying to be like Mike. That's really, 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 really funny. And I like to know a little bit more as to how the girl died and what happened there as to why she's haunting the school. Wish we could have found more information on it. And if we ever do, we will not hesitate to share it here on the podcast or feature it on our website or Instagram as well. So, moving to the south in El Paso, Texas, we're going to El Paso High School, which has the reputation for paranormal activity. In El Paso High School, people sometimes find the hallways filled with mist, unexplainable goo drips from the ceilings, and at one point, there was a discovery of hidden classrooms beneath the building. Now, the mist and the goo automatically reminded me of the Amityville movies where they had the blood oozing from the walls. Is it, that's just where my mind went instantly. With the mist, that's really, really, really weird. With the mist, that kind of reminded me of my own experience that I had shared with you guys earlier in this end of summer horror special where we had seen like the illusion of flames and smelled the smoke but didn't actually see the fire. That's what that kind of reminded me of. And aside from the mist in the halls and the unexplainable goo dripping from the ceilings, some students have also said that they've heard basketball games, full on basketball games, going on in the auditorium. When they open the door, the gym is empty, no one's there. Now, that's that's a really cool phenomenon to me because I read about this before and heard about it, where I think in instances like that, it's kind of like time is repeating itself on loop. Like it may have been something eventful that happened that day, particularly maybe to one spirit or one group of spirits where they're just reliving that moment over and over, and that's what's being heard and being looped through time. That's one thing I personally believe, and I think that it's cool that, well, cool, but also freaky that that's going on there at El Paso High. Now, one of the maybe most creepy tales of El Paso High was the story of the girl in the yearbook photo. So, suddenly, in the graduating class of 1985's yearbook photo, there was a girl that no one had remembered, no one had seen before. The girl was wearing all white, and per the students, the graduating class of 1985, she was not actually present when the picture was taken. So pretty much she was not there, but when the picture was developed and everyone saw the picture, everyone wondered who this girl was. Like she wasn't at the shoot. Some people recalled having sweaty palms during the photo shoot, just feeling uneasy, and to this day, no one can identify her in this picture. After review of the negative of the photo, she did not appear even in the negative. It was just in the picture. The first thing a lot of people will be like, okay, maybe it was Photoshop, but this picture was taken years before Photoshop was even developed. And to this day, that photo actually resides in the trophy cases of the school. So that photo is still there. If by some way we can get a copy of that photo, we'll be more than happy to share it on our website. If we ever can obtain that, we'll post it there and also on Instagram for you all to see. So once again, like the ghost of the little girl from the school in Anchorage, Alaska, from Night Mute, I wonder where she came from, what's her story. A lot of people feel that she may have been studying or something happened in one of the hidden classrooms that were found beneath the building because the disturbances or her appearance happened shortly thereafter the discoverance of those hidden classrooms. So maybe there might be an association there that may have stirred up or released her somehow. Who knows, but she wanted to be seen. And also, aside from ghost girls popping up in photos, some alumni of the school and even faculty said that they've seen hundreds of ghosts hold pep rallies in the middle of the night at the school. So they're having basketball games, throwing pep rallies. You know, the fact that alumni and faculty have stated that yes, this is happening, we know that this is an occurrence that goes on at the school. That's really frightening to me because, to be honest, if I ever seen anything like that, I would want to share it, but at the same time, I probably wouldn't show it back up to work. And the most interesting thing is also that with both of these schools, with El Paso High and Night Mute, is that the spirits have an affinity for the sport of basketball, which makes sense because if they're school age kids, especially with high school, basketball and football are two of the most popular sports in high school. So it's possible if they are stuck there haunting the halls, then they're reliving those moments, and they need some form of entertainment too. So I guess they're entertaining themselves the best way they know how by shooting some hoops and cheering on the local basketball team of the afterlife, I suppose. So moving to the Midwest, we're going to Florissant, Missouri, where we go to Parker Roads Elementary School. So Parker Roads Elementary School was built on old cemetery ground. Okay, so that's already fodder for some creepy mess. So in the 1950s, the state of Missouri ordered Leaf Brown Cemetery to dig up all of the bodies in the cemetery and move them to another area prior to the construction of the neighborhood and school there. So you have bodies that are being moved from their resting place where they were given their last goodbye from their family, from their loved ones, being moved somewhere else. That's already the perfect recipe for disaster right there. I mean, it's kind of like it goes back to our very first episode of Paris Catacombs, where all of the bodies were dug up because people didn't like the smell of the decaying bodies nearby, so they were all moved. And that's why people state that the Paris Catacombs are rumored to be haunted because they pretty much just dumped all the bodies there, and they were all just piled on top of each other without any regard. So we know that that's kind of caused a haunting there, the Paris Catacombs. So it's pretty safe to say that that's most likely the main source of the haunting that's going on at Parker Roads Elementary. So, with the haunting rumor of Parker Roads Elementary School, it's rumored that one body was left behind during the moving of the bodies from the cemetery, and the ghost of that dead body is the ghost that haunts Parker Road School. So the thing is with this ghost is that the teachers and other staff haven't seen it, but the students have seen it on multiple occasions. And they've seen it mostly in the bathrooms. So it makes sense for the students to see it because elementary school kids, they're young and they're more impressionable, and they're also more open minded because they don't have the skepticism that adults have and young adults have, teenagers. They don't have that. They don't have that mechanism, that defense mechanism built up already. So they're more open to seeing things and experiencing supernatural phenomena at an earlier age and not knowing exactly what it is. So with this spirit, it, as I stated before, it's said to haunt the bathrooms, and students have identified it as a woman in a black dress with long, wavy blonde hair, but she has no eyes. Okay, that's creepy. I'm sorry. That is really creepy. So, of course, when these students see her, they obviously know something's wrong. You know, they probably see her and mistake her for maybe another parent or staff, but when they see that she has no eyes, they probably know that something is wrong, which is why this has become a story on the internet, a phenomena for us to share. Now, once again, I would like to know the story. Like, we know that the bodies were dug up, and there's a rumor that the body was left behind and the body may have been hers. But why the bathroom? That's the one thing. Like, a lot of these legends that I'm finding, have a lot to do with the bathroom. Most of them that we're finding, especially with schools. And I think with them being legends and lore and just ghost stories passed down or just experiences, I think it just derives from the bathroom supposedly supposed to be a safe place where these lore and ghost stories kind of make it anything but. But at Parker Roads Elementary, with the moving of the bodies, I personally think even though they're experiencing this thing with the one spirit, I personally think they should count themselves lucky because they could be dealing with the whole cemetery full of them from moving them from their final resting spots to another. And it just makes you wonder how often has this happened in the United States or even worldwide, how often, since this also happened in the Paris with the Paris catacombs, how often does this happen? How often does cemeteries and spirits, well, not spirits, but bodies be disturbed and moved? And, even though the spirits are no longer inhabiting their bodies, it's their final resting spot. And it can be sometimes be deemed disrespectful, which is why they can cause hauntings to manifest. So I think those things should be taken into account. But most of the time, when things like this happen, most people just feel it's just bodies And most people are skeptical until they experience something themselves. Moving on to the fourth and final school we're going to share with you guys tonight. The last school is in Kingman, Arizona, known as Lee Williams High School. In 2013, the principal of Lee Williams High School in Kingman, Arizona, by the name of Steve Elwood, spoke to the LA Times about the multitude of ghost stories surrounding their school. Many people in the town believe that the campus is haunted. They reported seeing ghosts of women in prairie outfits and men dressed in their best wear, most of the time previous century wear, while attending graduation events. So they're out there at graduation events and they see women in prairie outfits and men in knitted outfits, outdated outfits that they know that it just doesn't sit right. You know, you can just kind of spot it sticking out like a sore thumb. It just doesn't sit right. There's also been reports of a man dressed in a long coat and sporting a bowler hat and while roaming the halls at the school. So, for those of you who don't know what a bowler hat is, it's kind of like those. I always kind of they're kind of like fedoras in a way, but instead of like being kind of folded at the top, they're round and the outside is round. That's the best way I can describe it. If you don't know, just look it up. I can't really explain it, but he's been seen wearing that in a long coat, just roaming the halls of the school. Aside from him, there's also a tiny girl making herself heard at night about wanting to play outside. So she'll be in the school wanting to go outside, maybe to recess. Maybe something happened where she wasn't able to go outside on her last day of her life. We don't know. But she is also set to haunt Lee Williams High School. So, with it being a high school, that kind of makes you wonder, was Lee Williams High School an elementary school at one point? Maybe back in the prairie days, maybe? You know, who knows with all of the different magnitude of spirits going on. As Steve Elwood has said, there's different ghost stories that are spread about the school, and I don't want to say that they're not true, but I don't want to say that they're false either, because for it to be that many ghost stories going on, there has to be someone experiencing something. And with these claims, I don't want to write them off as just being hearsay or just ghost stories, because sometimes there's, well, most of the time, there's something more and there's some truth to it. So when we dug a little bit deeper, we found that Lee Williams High School was is situated on what used to be an old pioneer cemetery. So that probably explains the prairie dresses and the knitted garb that the ghosts of the men are said to wear while attending graduation events. So that's most likely where that's coming from. And once again, it stems from, relocating bodies and moving graves, destroying graves, final resting spots. Nothing good can come from that. And that's most likely why they're experiencing it. And just to hear it from at this school, Lee Williams, and the school before that at Parker Roads, and even with the Paris catacombs, just countless numbers of times where just destruction of graves can lead to things like this, and just people not having their final resting spot anymore, and not knowing what's being done with these bodies. Are they being laid to rest properly in a different place, or are they just being dumped underneath the city? What's going on. So it just makes you wonder. So back to Lee Williams High School. In 2013, during construction of the new school building, 11 graves, 7 coffins, and many artifacts were uncovered on the premises. Whew. So with this, they destroyed or destructed half of the cemetery. Well, I'm not gonna say half of it. Most likely all of it. But some bodies and graves were left behind, so they potentially built right on top of these people, right on top of their final resting spots, and they're walking and running and doing whatever goes on, right on top of these people's resting spots. And I grew up in the South, and it's kind of like an old superstition where you don't walk on, you don't walk on graves. It's just it's just disrespectful, and that's part of the reason why now even as an adult, I kind of don't like going to going to graveyards or cemeteries. And when I do, and I feel like I'm stepping on something, I'll be like, I'm sorry. I'll apologize. I'm sorry for this. I'm sorry. It's just, I guess it just dates back to superstition. It's probably a stupid one, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Because I'm going to sidetrack for a little bit. I'll get back to Lee Williams in a minute, but with the whole graveyard thing, I've always been that way ever since a kid, but it kind of cemented on the fact when I saw this movie when I was younger. I can't remember what age I was, but the film was called The Grave Dancers. And it was one of those like eight horror films. I can't really remember, but it was like a segment of them, like about eight of them that came out each year. If you're a horror junkie, you might know what I'm talking about, but it was called Grave Dancers, and it scared the crap out of me, but it's now one of my favorites, and I've been trying for years to find it on DVD, but it's not anywhere. But pretty much what happened in the movie, I don't want to give it away for anyone who may want to see it, who's able to find it. If you're able to find it, let me know. But in the movie, a group of friends who are mourning the recent loss of their friend go see their friend at the graveyard, and while there, they end up dancing in the graveyard. I guess just, they don't want to mourn their friend. They want to celebrate their life, which is understandable. Some people do that, but they end up dancing. But when they dance on people's graves. So they do that disrespectful act, but not only that, they dance in the graveyard of the city's kind of undesirables. So they weren't really good people in life. So you can imagine what kind of type of spirits they have to deal with. So I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't want to get into too much, but when I saw that movie, I remember saying that's exactly why I don't walk on graveyards. I don't walk on grave sites. I don't walk on any burial place. That's exactly why I remember when I saw that movie. I thought that. So I just thought that was worth sharing because that's exactly what it reminded me of when I had read that while researching Lee Williams High School. So back with the ghost stories that the principal was talking about that is shared about Lee Williams High School. The janitor of the school insists that the stories are true. He's claimed to have heard footsteps entering the bathrooms at night when no one was there, only him. And there were voices coming from some of the classrooms, but when he would go to the classrooms to investigate, there would be no one there. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm inclined to believe the janitor because he's there at night by himself. No one else is there, and he would know. I just want to say that because things like that do happen. And most of the things I think happen when it's quiet, or especially in the school when it's quiet and no one is really around. It's of course excluding the graduation events, but even then, like it's just easy for them to blend in. Like yes, they stand out, but they're more also blending in. So it's just like, is it real or is it not real? Are these just people dressed in prairie wear? Are these just, what is it? Do they just have a separate sense of fashion so they're able to blend in? But I do believe the janitor's experience with that. My grandmother actually shared a story with me when my her and my grandfather had a janitorial business back in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. They had a janitorial business that did really, really well. And my grandma said she could recall cleaning, and she was cleaning a building. She heard just heels clicking down the hall. She was at a school, and a woman passed by. And she was just like, "Hi," and just kept it moving. But it was she kind of sounded. My grandma said the way she said hi was kind of like an eerie tone. Like it was kind of like she was talking to a glass and was like echoed and drawn out. Like grandma said, it just didn't sound like a natural hi. And when she had to walk by the glass, she could still hear her footprints, but she could no longer see her. Well, not her footprints. She could hear her footsteps, but could no longer see her. And my grandma was like, that's the last time she had decided to clean that building. I want to ask her if she has any other stories. I would like to share that because she says she has loads. So if I ever get around to getting that from her, she doesn't really like to talk about it, but that was one that she was able to share with me because she is a listener. She does listen to the podcast. She said it just scares her sometimes, so it does take a little bit of time to get around to it, but she does. She does really enjoy it and enjoy what we do here, and she is proud of me. But yeah, back to Lee Williams. It's really really wild to know all of these different stories, and I'm sure there are countless others with all the schools here in America and all the schools worldwide. Most schools go back decades, maybe even centuries old. I would love to get some more stories from like colleges and things like that. And who knows, we may revisit and have another segment where we just share haunted schools just for the heck of it. And if we don't share it here on the podcast, we'll share it on our website, beyondthebazaar.com, if we're not able to get here. Also, we do, once again, outside of the podcast, if there's anything that's cool and we find neat or creepy or bizarre, we'll always share it on our website, our Instagram, Beyond the Bazaar is our handle, our Facebook page, Beyond the Bazaar. We'll share it there. So we're not always just sharing creepy stuff on our podcast. We may share it on our website as well. So it's not on the podcast, but it'll be on our website. So just check that out. We would love to have you there. And before I forget, we are also open to any type of experiences or stories that you all would like to share. Please let us know. We have Instagram, our DMs are open. We have email, beyondthebazaar@gmail.com. We have our website. You can send us a message there. Yeah, send us a personal message, a PM on Facebook. Our Facebook page, beyondthebazaar.com. You can send us a PM there. We're everywhere. So, if you have any experiences or anything you would like to share or anything you would like to hear us talk about or cover, by any means, just give us a shout out and we'll see if we can make it happen. Well, that concludes tonight's episode of Beyond the Bazaar. We'll be back again next week, next Tuesday, with a brand new episode. Until then, have a great night and stay bizarre.